My name is Annette Fielding, and I learned early that silence can wound deeper than words. For years, I sat at the far end of every table, smiling through jokes that weren't funny, pretending the weight in my chest was pride instead of shame. They didn't shout at me or hit me. They simply made me invisible. That kind of cruelty doesn't leave bruises. It leaves proof that you were never really seen. Last Thanksgiving, my father poured wine for everyone but me. He said, "You've always been hard to place, Annette." He laughed. Everyone laughed. And I realized I'd spent half my life earning respect from people who never planned to give it. So that night, I stopped waiting for them to notice me. They thought my quiet meant defeat. They had no idea what silence sounds like right before the world changes. The envelope was heavy, expensive, the kind meant to impress before it's even opened. Ivory paper, gold lettering, a faint smell of cologne that wasn't his. I didn't need to read the names to know what it was, but my eyes caught the last line anyway. Arthur Fielding and Bethany Ross request your presence. My father was getting married. Again. To a woman who could have easily mistaken me for her college roommate. I set the card on the table and stared out the window. Washington, D.D., was gray that afternoon, wind pressing against the glass hard enough to sound like breathing. I'd spent the morning tracing flight data, numbers that told stories nobody else wanted to read. That was my world. Quiet, precise, and invisible. He used to say my life looked small. I used to pretend not to care. Maybe I'd gotten too good at pretending. The invitation shimmered under the lamp. My name looked misplaced among all that gold. I thought about throwing it away, but her handwriting, Bethany's, was too clean, too careful. It wasn't an invitation. It was a reminder of where I stood. Then I heard my mother's voice, soft but unyielding. The one that never left me, even after she did. Go when they call, but don't let them define you. So I booked a ticket to Seattle, economy. Not out of thrift, out of choice. Before shutting my laptop, I noticed the confirmation email from the airline. At the bottom, one quiet line. It's an honor to have you on board again, Ms. Fielding. I didn't realize that within hours. Those same words would become the beginning of an undoing none of them saw coming. The terminal at Dulles hummed like a beehive, voices overlapping, suitcase wheels rattling, coffee cups clinking. I moved slowly through it all, a gray coat over my shoulders, my old silver case scuffed and marked with an NTSB sticker half peeled away. I'd never replaced it. Some things weren't meant to look new. Across the crowd, I spotted my father. He stood tall, posture rehearsed, the kind of confidence that came from knowing the world usually said yes to him. Beside him, Bethany gleamed under the fluorescent light, a cream dress tight around her waist, sunglasses still on indoors. Her smile was too polished to be kind. Her sons, two of them, walked behind her, scrolling through their phones, AirPods in, heads tilted back in the same careless rhythm as their mother. None of them looked up when I stopped in front of them. My father extended his hand, as if greeting a client, not a daughter. You made it. We thought you'd skip it again. I smiled faintly. The kind you give before a storm. Crashes don't schedule around weddings. Bethany laughed. That light, brittle kind of laugh meant to be overheard. Oh, she's funny. Anyway, we're in first class. What about you, sweetheart? The gate agent scanned my passport. Economy, seat 32A. Bethany tilted her head, lips curved into a mock sympathy. Don't complain, Annette. This is all you can handle. My eyes stayed on the ticket as I said quietly, I handle worse. They didn't ask what I meant. They never did. When I turned to leave, the gate agent straightened, almost instinctively. Thank you for your service, ma'am. I caught the flicker of confusion on Bethany's face as the words echoed. Service? She mouthed. But I was already walking toward the jet bridge. My heels struck the floor in even rhythm, each step blending with the hum of turbines somewhere beyond the glass. The cabin smelled faintly of coffee and metal when we lifted off. Sunlight bled violet through the windows, coloring the clouds like bruises. I sat in the last row by the window, where no one expects conversation. The young soldier beside me glanced over, curious. He asked what I did for a living. I told him the truth. I listened to what planes say after they fall. He nodded once, understanding the weight of silence better than most. An hour into the flight, the lights flickered. A thin curl of smoke drifted from the galley. The air shifted, a low hum deepening under the floor. The soldier's hand tightened around the armrest. In the front, I saw Bethany turn halfway in her seat, her smile cracking under the tremor. "Relax, Annette. You can't fix a plane with that notebook of yours." I didn't look up. My pen, the silver one engraved with Flight 137, moved across the page, noting the change in cabin pressure. My handwriting stayed steady, though the air around us wasn't. Then came the captain's voice, calm, deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have senior NTSB investigator Annette Fielding on board. The situation is under control." The cabin went silent. Every passenger turned, searching. Bethany froze, her face drained of color. My father rose halfway from his seat, peering back through the curtain, his mouth opening, then closing again. When we landed safely, the captain stood at the door, waiting. He bowed his head slightly. "Ma'am, it's good to have someone like you watching the skies." I nodded once. My father said nothing. Bethany kept her eyes on the floor, her voice finally gone, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small walking ahead of them. Outside the terminal, the wind smelled of jet fuel and rain, sharp, real, alive. My father followed a few paces behind, silent the entire drive. He didn't know it yet, but the world he'd built on pride had just shifted, one quiet mile at a time. The ballroom glowed like a stage built for a performance no one believed in. Gold banners hung from the ceiling, "Love Reborn," and crystal chandeliers threw fractured light over white tablecloths and half smiles. I stepped in wearing a simple dark blue dress and a gray wool coat, the kind that didn't try to compete. The air smelled of perfume and polished ambition. Bethany spotted me from across the room. Her smile froze for a second before she turned, whispering something to a woman in sequins. They laughed like a cue from a script. My place card sat at the far end of the hall, next to the service doors, a chair away from the emergency exit. I didn't ask to move. I'd spent most of my life seated near exits. It was easier to leave when things caught fire. When my father took the microphone, the lights hit his face like a spotlight. His voice carried the authority of a man used to being listened to. "Ladies and gentlemen, my daughter Annette, she works for something in D.C. government paperwork, I suppose." Always too serious. Laughter rippled through the tables, the polite kind that cuts sharper than open mockery. I stared at my wineglass, turning it slowly, watching the reflection of the chandelier shatter across the surface. Bethany leaned toward her friend. "She inspects paper planes or something." Then a chair scraped against the floor. A man's voice broke through the laughter. "Wait, Annette Fielding? The Fielding who led the Phoenix investigation?" The music stopped. Even the servers froze. Major General Hale, retired Air Force, walked toward me, hand extended, expression steady. "Ma'am, your report saved hundreds of lives. I've read every word." He said it loudly enough for the room to hear. My father's hand tightened around his champagne flute. Bethany's painted lips trembled before she lifted her glass, pretending to sip. The applause never came, but the silence was louder than anything I'd ever heard. Later, I stepped outside to the balcony. Rain slicked the marble railing, the city lights bleeding through it like gold veins. My father found me there, his voice low. "Careful. You didn't have to embarrass me in front of them." I kept my eyes on the street below, where headlights smeared across wet asphalt. I didn't say a word. He hesitated, the air thick with unspoken blame, then turned and walked back into the noise. The door closed, and I was left with rain and my reflection in the glass, both transparent, both fading. I was halfway through packing my things when my phone buzzed. The screen glowed red. "NTSB alert. Flight 4A2. Lost contact." For a second, the laughter from the ballroom echoed down the hall, distant and wrong. I slipped on my coat and headed for the exit. Bethany's voice called after me. "Annette, where are you going? We're about to cut the cake." I didn't turn around. To where the cake doesn't matter. In the car, the dashboard light painted everything cold. I opened my laptop, fingers moving on instinct. When the flight number loaded, my heart stalled. Aero Pacific, a maintenance contract tied to Fielding Aero, my father's latest investment. The road to Oregon stretched dark and slick, The rain hit hard enough to erase the sound of the radio until only the voice of the reporter cut through. Possible mechanical failure, debris located near Cascade Range. By the time I reached the crash perimeter, dawn was beginning to break, a dull, bruised kind of light. The red warning sign flashed through the mist. Authorized personnel only. I stepped out, mud pulling at my shoes, the air thick with burnt metal and fuel. The security officer recognized me immediately. "Ms. Fielding? You're in charge?" I nodded, the words catching somewhere between duty and dread. Through the smoke, I saw a figure under a floodlight, Mark Dalton, the senior engineer, face pale, uniform soaked. "They told me to skip inspections," he said, voice shaking. "Said the investors wanted faster turnover." "Which investor?" I asked. He looked at me like he wished I hadn't asked. "Arthur Fielding." The ground tilted slightly beneath my feet. Somewhere behind me, the cameras clicked, recording fragments of wreckage, while inside me, something else crashed. The last remaining wall between who I was and where I came from. The sky above Oregon was silent, but I could still hear it falling. The rain in Oregon didn't fall. It pressed down. It seeped into the ground, into our coats, into everything we tried to keep clean. Flashlights cut through the fog, glinting off twisted aluminum, torn fabric, and shards of lives scattered across the mud. The air reeked of jet fuel and something far heavier. Silence. I led the recovery team through the wreckage, my boots sinking into the soft ground with every step. These weren't numbers on a screen or words in a report. This was the aftermath, raw and unfiltered. Each tag we placed carried a name, a story, a family waiting for closure they didn't know would never come. Hours later, someone called out. We'd found it, the black box. I took it from the mud myself, wiping the grime with my sleeve until the label emerged, FL482CVR. Beneath the scratched surface, almost invisible under the floodlight, was a faint mark burned into the metal. Fielding Arrow. The world seemed to shrink into the size of that one piece of metal. My father's company, his pride, his signature. My breath came out slow, visible in the cold air. I forced my voice steady, tag it, preserve the chain of custody. That night, I called him. He sounded tired, but his tone still carried command. "Annette, you can manage this quietly. The media doesn't need to know. This isn't about the media," I said. "It's about 42 dead." Silence. Then, softer, the voice of a man who'd always mistaken control for care. "You're my daughter. Don't destroy us." I closed my eyes. I'm also the government's witness. I can't choose both. When the call ended, I sat in the dark, listening to the snow patter against the window. Outside, the wreckage was slowly being buried under white, as if the earth itself was trying to cover the truth. But the truth doesn't stay buried. It waits for daylight. The next morning, the world felt heavier. I returned to the NTSB field office in Portland, where the air smelled like stale coffee and exhaustion. On my desk sat a plain envelope, no name, no return address. It bulged slightly, thick and deliberate. Inside was a stack of cash and a single note. "For your time. Let's keep this between family." I didn't need to. I slid the envelope into an evidence bag and picked up the phone. "This is Annette Fielding, NTSB. I'm reporting attempted bribery related to the Oregon investigation." By evening, the story broke wide open. CNN's banner blazed across the screen in every airport and bar. "NTSB investigator reports bribery. Possible family connection in Oregon crash." I'd spent my entire career avoiding the spotlight. Now it found me in the worst possible way. Back at my hotel, the phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Calls, texts, numbers I didn't recognize. One message read, "Dad wants to talk." I turned it off. When I switched on the TV, I saw him sitting under bright studio lights, wearing his favorite gray suit. "My daughter is emotional," he said. "She's misinterpreting." I stared at the screen, calm, emotional. I whispered, "That's what men call women when they start losing control." A few hours later, my director called. Not to reprimand me, but to ask something I'd never expected. "It's time the public hears you," he said. The next day, I walked down the long hallway to the press room. My father stood on the opposite side, straightening his tie. He saw me and froze, his eyes, pleading, angry, afraid, all at once. I touched the insignia on my jacket, aligning it perfectly. When I stepped to the podium, the flashbulbs burst like lightning. The first question came fast. Ms. Fielding, is it true your father is a key investor in the maintenance company? Yes, I said. That's why I recused myself after confirming the findings. The truth doesn't need my protection, it protects itself. The room went silent. Cameras kept rolling, but no one spoke. In that stillness, I realized I had crossed the line for good. There was no going back to being just a daughter. There was only the work and the truth. The lights were blinding, washing the room in sterile white. 17 microphones stood before me, cameras flashing in bursts that sounded like rain. Behind me, the NTSB seal glowed. On the screen, Oregon Flight 482, final report announcement. My voice came steady. After 6 weeks of investigation, the crash was caused by improper maintenance performed by Fielding Aero, resulting in a fatal mechanical failure. At the back, my father sat in his gray suit, eyes red, lips trembling. The light that had always belonged to him didn't reach his face this time. A reporter called out, "Isn't Fielding Aero partially owned by your family?" "It is," I said. That's why the truth had to come from me. Flashbulbs erupted. CNN cut in live. A reporter whispered, "Integrity has a face tonight." Outside, rain fell quietly. I headed to the airport for my next flight. At the counter, the clerk smiled. "Economy again, huh?" Then she read my name and straightened. "Ms. Fielding, the FAA director would like to greet you." He shook my hand. "You reminded this country what accountability looks like." No applause followed, only silence and respect. Walking toward security, I heard Bethany's voice in my head. "This is all you can handle." Apparently, it was enough. 3 weeks later, the headlines finally began to fade, though the story never truly left. Fielding Aero had been suspended, the name stripped from every aircraft part it once branded. Bethany was gone. No forwarding address. No farewell. Leaving my father alone in a house that suddenly seemed too large for the echo of one man's pride. I hadn't planned on seeing him again until a small envelope arrived at my door. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. "Annette, I need to talk, please." When I opened the door, he was standing there. Not the man in the tailored suits, but someone smaller, older, holding another envelope in his trembling hands. "I never understood what you did," he said quietly, "until it destroyed me." "I didn't destroy you. Dad, I protected the sky you made money from." He sank into a chair, voice low and worn. "You really believe people care about the truth?" "They don't have to," I said. "It just has to exist." He slid the envelope across the table. Inside wasn't money, it was a letter. His handwriting again, steadier this time. He'd watched the Phoenix coverage years ago, but couldn't bring himself to say he was proud. "You were the only Fielding who didn't need the family name to be someone." We sat in silence. No tears, no forgiveness spoken aloud. Just the fragile peace of understanding too late. As he left, he turned once more. "Do you still fly economy?" "Always," I said. "It's closer to the truth." A year later, I was on a flight to Alaska. No black box to retrieve, no press conference waiting on the other end. Just sky. For once, I wasn't chasing answers or repairing the damage others left behind. I wanted to remember what it felt like to fly for peace, not for purpose. The aircraft climbed steadily, the horizon fading into bands of silver and blue. When we passed over Oregon, I looked down. The mountains below were blanketed in white, soft and endless, hiding the place that had once been filled with wreckage, fire, and names I still carried in my sleep. There was no sound here, no sorrow, just the quiet grace of distance. A young flight attendant paused by my seat, her smile hesitant but kind. "Ms. Fielding, are you the NTSB investigator? You're the reason I joined aviation safety." I met her eyes and nodded, feeling the gentleness in her sincerity. No headlines, no judgment, just respect, the quiet kind that finally felt earned. When she returned with coffee, something else rested on the tray. A spare economy ticket, folded neatly with a handwritten note tucked beneath. For the woman who made flying safer for all of us. I turned the paper over in my hand. For years, I'd been defined by reports, numbers, and other people's voices. Now, One simple note held more truth than all of them combined. Outside, sunlight hit the wing just right, scattering into a shimmer of silver that filled the cabin like applause only the sky could give. Maybe economy seats were never humiliation. Maybe they were the world's way of keeping me grounded long enough to see what was worth flying for. The captain's voice came through the intercom, calm and warm. "We'll be landing soon." I smiled, my reflection faint against the window. "I already have." The wheels touched down softly, steady and sure. No one clapped, but I didn't need them to. The sky had already given me all the recognition I'd ever wanted.